We're not out there fighting anything other than crime.
We see stuff that nobody should have to see.
Put your hands back! Hands it back! Hands it back! Go!
Get out of it, Mel. Get out! Get out!
Don't move! Don't move!
Okay. George 31, erect out.
Don't go!
Put it in paper.
You're going to jail. Where else do you think you're going?
You're listening to The Beat, Profiles of Police Nationwide. Okay, so we were having tech difficulties previously. We're back live now, ladies and gentlemen, episode 255 of the Mike Haven podcast. It's been a while since I've had to do an interview like this, but it's okay. We adjust and we work on the fly, and you guys are a good audience. So I know you'll understand. And just so we didn't have to keep enduring the video issues, and that would take away from an episode that I know all of you were looking forward to, and I certainly was looking forward to. We're going to do the interview over the phone. So we saw the sponsors earlier. Bill Ryan, of course, if you missed it, was one of the sponsors, as was Scotty Saul of the Electric Vehicle Rescue app. So what you're seeing right now is a picture of Gary Mullins, his partner Mel Gonzalez, in the early 90s on the streets of Cleveland on patrol, and two cameramen from the show Cops. That's because Gary Mullins is the guest tonight for, as I mentioned, the debut of a new miniseries that we're starting here in the Mike the New Haven podcast, which is The Beat, Profiles of Police Nationwide. So that banner on the bottom is, of course, a voice of Gary Mullins. He's on speakerphone. We got him live from Cleveland tonight. And Gary, apologies for the technical difficulties, but where we left off and where you can jump right back into, as we'll chronicle your career tonight, is your father was a policeman. And I think you were mentioning, and I before the audio issues cut us off the first time, that you had some mechanic background. You were doing that for a little bit before you came on the job?
Yeah, I was working for a wine distributor right downtown, actually where the Cleveland Stadium is, and I would just do service work on their, the trucks or delivery trucks and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Excellent. Also, what's one thing that's worth noting is, Cleveland, pretty big city, pretty big population. They call it factory town. So working in Cleveland back then, even before getting on the job, growing up in a big city like that, how do you think that serves as an education for how to navigate through life?
I guess I would say you get used to it. I mean, from being, I grew up in a suburb of Cleveland when I was a kid, but going down in that area, I guess you just adapt and you get used to it. It's not like you get smacked in the face and it's, you're in a whole other world, so it really wasn't hard to adapt. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Right.
So when you got on Cleveland, and we're talking with Gary Mullins, this is volume 1 of The Beat, Profiles of Police Nationwide. We're doing the show via audio tonight due to some video difficulties. The show must go on, so bear with me, guys, while I do it, and I know you will. You got on in 1988. Now, around this time, crime around the country was going ballistic. I mean, in the bigger cities like LA and New York, it was really out of control. Was the problem to that effect, to that extent, that bad in Cleveland, or was it somewhere in the middle? What was the makeup of Cleveland in the 80s when you originally got on?
What started, it was probably not long after I got out of the academy and got on the job. In the 3rd district, where I started, where my whole career was, we had an extremely bad drug problem in a lot of the projects in that area, and it just got completely infiltrated with Jamaicans that came in, and it in the early 90s through the mid 90s. I mean, it was just out of control. And the drug problem was everywhere, but we had a real bad issue with the Jamaican community who came in and they just took over the apartment complexes in certain areas. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty bad, and it was pretty bad quick,
Yeah. Well, this is during that crack era, too, where, crack was just starting to hit the streets and really create a dent in things. And like I said, it wasn't just certain cities. The whole country was feeling it, some areas worse than others. And the danger with drugs, no matter what kind of drugs are being sold, is that it's not necessarily the consumption. I'm sure you can agree with that. The consumption is dangerous, too, because of what you're doing to your body. But the people that are selling them, of course, a lot of them are armed. It becomes a turf war type thing. And forget overdoses. Bodies just start to drop from all the shootings, all the stabbings over who wants to be the drug kingpin of Cleveland or any city for that matter.
Yeah, it was still. Yeah, it was rampant, and there was. There wasn't a day out in that area that there wasn't a shooting or there wasn't, extreme crime as a result of it. The crack cocaine epidemic. I mean, it just took off in a minute, and as we all know, it hasn't ended.
No, yeah, it's still going. Some areas have recovered, and some areas are unfortunately still very much in the trenches. One thing I always ask to any cop or fireman that I interview is when you got on, who helped you learn the job? So getting on during that time, of course, listen, you could go to your dad for advice, and it's great to have someone like him and the experience he had. He retired as a sergeant. But also anybody else that you were immediately partnered with or at least worked in the same tour with, who would you credit with helping you learn how to be an effective cop?
Well, there wasn't one specifically one person or one partner in general, because when we first started out, you were on probation for a 6-month period, and you got moved from car to car to car, so you had a different set of different partners month to month to month to month, and everybody gave you their input and taught you different things and different, techniques. So you got well-rounded as a result of working with, several different officers and senior officers as they were training you when you were in the, first 6 months of your probationary period. So what they've tried to do is, get you with, different guys that teach you different things. So it made you well-rounded, as you came out of your probationary period.
Nice. Exactly. And I like how you put that. You pick up different things from each officer that can mold you into an effective police officer in your own right. Now, we promised that we talk about this and we can get into it now. Each city set up differently, of course. Some cities have precincts. Some cities have substations. In Cleveland, you guys have districts, and it's divided up into 6 districts. So explain the district setup for those outside the Cleveland area that may not understand, myself included.
Yeah. Well, the districts, there were 6 districts, and a while back they cut down and got rid of one. But a district consisted of boundaries and areas that every district police station patrolled, and within those districts, they had zones. Every car was assigned a zone, which is a smaller area of that district that you were in charge of patrolling. So, when a call came across the radio, they would assign it, the dispatcher would assign it to that car that was in charge of that zone. So it was just a breakdown down there. And that's, back then, years and years ago, that's just how it was. If you worked a certain zone, you took pride in making sure that you tried to put a control on the crime. You know what I mean? And, if a call came over, even if you were on lunch or something, you'd get on the radio and just tell them, this is our zone, we'll take care of that run. We'll handle that. And that's where way, Mike, before the word community policing ever came around, we were taught that you took pride and wanted to be responsible for the residents and the citizens in the zone that you were assigned to. So it was kind of a responsibility and a pride thing to try to make sure that you kept the crime out of your zone.
Yeah.
And then as that elapsed, then somebody came up with these community policing thing. But we were doing that before they even talked about community policing.
Right.
Is what I'm getting at.
Right. And I talked about this, and it's amazing that, talking to police from outside of New York, you see that the job is still the same. The uniform may be different. The car that you drive may be different, but overall the mentality is pretty much the same. And that, as you said, we were talking about it last episode with my previous guest, that some people look at police as an occupying army of sorts, but the reality is, even if you don't physically live there, technically, in terms of owning property there, technically you do, because you're there however long your tour may be, multiple times a week. You have a say in what goes on in that community. So you're invested in that neighborhood. You're invested in wanting to see it do well, given the amount of time that you're walking that beat or spending time in the patrol car. And it allows you, with time, to not only take pride in your job, but take pride in that neighborhood and get to reap the benefits of that neighborhood doing well when crime is low.
Exactly. And then, like I said, when you were close knit with, with the residents and, even store owners and stuff like that, you were per se, there was respect, the residents and the store owners and factory owners, when they seen you out there being proactive, stopping and asking them, you know what I mean? Is everything okay here and this and that? There was more of a, in my opinion, more of a respect issue for the police back then, because we made it a point to be proactive and, interact with the people in the zone that you were working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it worked in hand, because if something happened or if there's a crime that occurred, you know what I mean, they were more apt to let you know. You could go to certain people and, get the respect and, solve the crimes a lot easier.
Absolutely. Do you remember your first arrest? And if so, what was it for?
Like I said, well, we were on a probationary period for 6 months, but prior to that, as soon as you got out of the academy, you were actually a third man in a car with two partners. They put you in the back seat of the police car, and you just rode with them for a week to just get a taste of what goes on. But the first arrest I remember making, and actually I was a third man in the car, we got a call for a disturbance, a fight in a gentleman's club, obviously downtown. It was on St. Clair Avenue, and there was a mess going on in there, and it turned out that there was a fight going on, and we went in and ended up arresting a guy with a gun out of that place. So that was the first arrest that kind of sticks to me, because I was actually a third man in a car, and it felt kind of weird sitting in the back seat with somebody we just arrested when you know what I mean?
Right.
You're green behind the ears as a police officer. You don't know what to expect,
Right. No, of course. We have a comment here in the live chat, and shout out to everybody that's tuning in. I know some of you were kind of taken aback when the first stream had to be ended due to technical problems, but for those of you that are back, I appreciate it. John Albanese is tuning in tonight. He says via YouTube, good. Hi, Mike. Good job as usual, reconnecting. Thank you. He says, I just wanted Mullins to know that his 15 minutes of fame inspired a whole generation of cops to be even anywhere near a real cop just like him. So that's from John Albanese. And Steve Stefanakis, who's a detective in the New York City Police Department Emergency Service Unit, which is the half SWAT, half rescue squad for the NYPD, says some great bands came out of Cleveland, the Dead Boys and Cobra Belle. So he mentions that, of course, and compliment to Cleveland. Steve's a big rock fan. And thanks, guys, like I said, for bearing with us tonight, despite the technical difficulties. So by the time that cops came to Cleveland in 1993, I imagine that you were somewhat familiar with the show, even if you didn't watch it all the time. I mean, by that point, it had gotten pretty popular. And you got 5 years on the job, all of it in the 3rd District. By that point, you and Mel are partnered up. Before I get to when cops came to Cleveland, when did Mel and you become steady partners, if at all, once you got past the probationary period, of course?
Well, after the probationary period, then you would get assigned to a platoon. There was, 3 platoons, day shift, second shift, and third shift. And then eventually there was a 4th platoon that was a shift in between second and third shift, which would take up the slack, because those were the more busier times of the night. But I was on a platoon and every month they would rotate you to another car. You know what I mean? And then it came to the point that they started rotating shifts. If you were on day shift, the next month you were on midnights, the next month you were on second shift, and you just kept rotating.
Yeah.
And I did that through my 6-month probation, and then they came up with this 4th platoon shift, and that shift never rotated. You know, it was like a 6 at night to 2 in the morning, or a 7 at night to 3 in the morning, but you didn't have to rotate. So I volunteered to go on that shift, and that's when I started working with Mel. It was probably no more than a year or so, maybe year and a half into my career when me and Mel got together and were working as partners.
Some partners mesh really, really well. Others don't. But it seemed like you guys just seemed to, I mean, by the time the episodes were filmed in 1993, which we'll talk about in depth in a second, you guys seemed to have a real good chemistry to you. So when you were working with him, when did you know what? This guy's all right, man. I could see myself working a long time with him.
It was actually because he came off a different shift. He did the same thing. He volunteered to go on that 4th platoon shift, and I did. And we started working together, and it was it. I mean, it was just one of them things. We just clicked, you know what I mean? And it just that's just how it worked. And that's where all that fell into place with these stolen car incidents, because technically it was like 80% of the time he would drive, because we used to get these sheets. We would get these sheets that come out on a computer every day, and there had to be 500 license plates on these sheets of stolen cars. So he would be driving, and we were on a car assigned that we really technically didn't answer radio. We were called it was like a first responder or a fast response car. So we weren't subjected to radio calls unless it was a code 1 call or we wanted to assist somebody. So we specialized ourselves into pursuing and making stolen car arrests. So I would pin this, we called it a hot sheet, and there had been 500 license plate numbers on this sheet. And we would just drive around into this, high crime areas where we knew the stolen cars were, and I would just keep looking at the sheet and looking at cars on the street, and looking at the sheet and looking at cars on the street. So we were like just a machine. And I would just tell Mel, we'd be driving down the street, I'd say, turn around, because one just passed us up,
Yep.
So, yeah, we won some pretty good awards through the years for making the most stolen car arrests in the city. We did pretty well.
Oh, yeah, I would say there's literally an episode, and I wish I could show the clip, but I can't because I'll get a copyright claim, and I don't want that. But they're on YouTube, and it's exactly as you just described it. You and Mel in the beginning, I guess they're asking Mel about frustrations about the job. He's given his frustrations or his thoughts on what's the most frustrating aspect, and that's when you say, Mel, turn around, and he asks you got one on the hot sheet? Yeah, and it was an Oldsmobile. Guy took off. You guys collared him on the highway. And that brings me, I guess, like I said, into 1993. Now, when people tell cops or firemen, hey, you're going to have a ride-along crew with you, some of them are like, oh, okay, cool. Some of them are like, oh, no. So what was your mentality or what was your thought process when they told you, hey, the cops crew is going to come riding with you?
At first, we were kind of apprehensive about it. I mean, not that we didn't, that we minded it, you know what I mean? But right off the bat, when we were introduced to the crew, who the cameraman was Richie Foreman and Hank Barr was a sound man. And if I might just add, Richie's his birthday was a day after mine, but he was a year older than me, and he just passed away last March here, which is unfortunate because he was a young guy. Yeah. But anyway, they told us straight out. They said, you don't have to worry about anything. You know what I mean? All we're going to do is sit in the back of this car, and we're just going to film what you got to do. We're not going to have an opinion. You know what I mean? We're not going to try to judge what you're doing. You know what I mean? And no, I mean, it was like almost like having 2 other policemen in the back of the car. You know what I mean? I mean, really personable guys, and I mean, I kept in contact with both Richie and Hank. I mean, up until Richie and flew some people out to his wedding when he got married in New York. I mean, paid for the flights and the hotel for some of these policemen to come to his wedding. So they were real personable. I mean, real great guys. There was no apprehension about these guys, sitting in the car and there was going to be an issue,
And that's what I liked about it. Like it just they were there, but it almost felt like they weren't there. And I mean that in a good way. And that, as exactly as you said, they were in the back seat, and it felt like with the way that they would frame the show, whichever officer it was, whichever city or town they happened to be filming in, it felt like you were having a one-on-one dialogue with that particular officer. And one episode I go back to that was filmed in Cleveland was Lou Knowles, the late Lou Knowles, who eventually became a lieutenant with the Cleveland Police Department. He unfortunately died of cancer, but he was featured in one of the episodes, and it's the beginning segment where him and Bob Rose, ironically, catch a couple of kids that stole a car. And you're watching the camera pan out at night to the 5th District, and you're watching the squad car go by, and you're hearing Lou talk about how he views the job, and he's talking about some of the frustrations. He's talking about some of the things that he enjoys most about it. And that whole time, as I'm watching that episode back on YouTube a few weeks ago, it's almost as if Lou was talking to me, the viewer, and any other viewer by extension. And I always loved that about the show because it was intimate, but it didn't judge. It gave you a firsthand look at what you guys did, but like you said, it never judged.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So before I get in further into those episodes, is there a moment, especially with what you're doing, right? You're chasing stolen cars. A lot of these guys and gals that steal these cars, they know what they're doing and they don't want to go to jail and they're not ready to go down without a fight. Some are, some aren't. Is there a particular dangerous moment during one of those, not even pursuits, but just a traffic stop of a stolen car where you said to yourself after the call was done, man, I'm fortunate that could have gone really bad?
Usually, I mean, these guys, I mean, today's, a whole different era, but usually, back then, the weapon a car thief had was a screwdriver, you know what I mean? And it 99% of the time, it was just a foot chase, you know what I mean? And, I only recall one incident, and that was another incident that we were filmed on where the suspect threw a gun out the window. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Going down the highway. But other than that, they're usually, and I'm just giving for instance, but they're usually not in that car that long before we would have caught up to them for them to, unless they had a gun on them, unless they were planning a robbery or something. But you really didn't come across weapons. It was just, a foot chase and, how long it was going to take to catch them. And back then, I didn't run out of breath too quick. So, you know what I mean? It wasn't like that. And I would even tell them, I'd be right behind me, just say, keep running, because I'll chase you for a half a mile. So you might as well just, and I'd be talking to them as I'm running after them, So, yeah, it wasn't, there was, the only apprehension was if, if they, if something happened, they turn around, they're coming at you with the car. That's a whole different story. But I mean, usually, we were behind them, chasing them. So, yeah, it wasn't, the adrenaline was there, but it, you never thought of a fear factor about, it was going to go south that way. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, when you're in the moment, that's true. You're generally not thinking about it. You're just thinking about getting that collar and getting that car back to whoever it is that person stole it from. And that episode, that when I mentioned earlier, when you were talking about Mel, or when I mentioned Mel, turn around. It's that same call where, yeah, he goes in the highway. Nate Sawa, who was on the strike force, and people may remember him from the first 48, helped you with that collar too. And Mel saw something sparkle in the road, and it was that gun. You guys were able to get off the street. Now, before I get to the infamous get on at Mel chase, and we'll talk about that in depth, one call that was absolutely hilarious, and I need to ask you, I don't know how you kept a straight face, because I wouldn't have. But that episode where, unfortunately, the deaf man got his car stolen by two guys, and you pull the guys over, and the deaf man is describing how he got his car stolen. For those of you that are watching this on YouTube, I highly suggest after this episode's over to go find that episode. How did you keep a straight face?
Well, you know, like I said, in that area too, we worked that area, so we were familiar. We were familiar with the guy, the deaf guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we had, you know what I mean? We had interaction with that guy, so it wasn't so much. You know, it was kind of comical because he's trying to explain it, and we're trying to understand it. And Mel did a pretty good job of trying to get the gist of what happened. You know, so yeah, it was kind of comical, but again, we go back to this, you know, having interaction with the neighbors and the people in that area. The guy that was in the back seat, I don't know if it was where it kept going, where he's banging his head on the
Yeah.
window of the police car. That was one of the biggest. That guy was one of the biggest headaches in that zone. You know, and in fact, his name was Gary Workman. I'll never forget it. And you know, he was a burglar, and he was, you know what I mean. That's just all part of, you know, interacting. You know, like I said, being proactive is the way it, you know, was back then. You know, and it's kind of got lax. But I mean, it just, you know, but yeah, we got it figured out. But you know, it was kind of comical, but it was just we had to do what we had to do, and what the irony of that was that when I was explaining during that episode, I was explaining, you know, about the situation about that guy being a deaf mute. Well, it wasn't 2 weeks later, I got called into my sergeant's office and said I have to answer to a complaint because somebody in the having to do, you know, with the institution or the hearing impaired said that you know, how could I say it, that I wasn't supposed to call him a deaf mute. I should have called him hearing impaired. And there was a big incident about it. And I'm like, you have to be kidding me. I mean, when I grew up, that's what you called them. They were deaf.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But anyway.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I somebody posted in the comments that of that particular episode on YouTube that the charges ended up getting dropped because the deaf guy's name was Mikey. And I guess he didn't have the right title on his car. So those guys actually got off, unfortunately, for that car theft. But like he said, they did. Yeah, he mentioned that one of the guys was Gary Workman, and he mentioned that Gary has since passed away. And that the other guy was Squeak. And then that guy has also since passed away. The other guy that was in the car with them when you guys collared him originally. Now, again, anybody, as I mentioned in the introduction of you, before I brought you on the show, anybody that knows that show or was a cop during that era or just simply grew up watching it during that era, if not the reruns, 30 years later, Get On It Mel is so iconic and people still quote it to this day. I'm sure you still hear it all the time. And that pursuit was just, I mean, it was amazing as it was hilarious. I mean, and then the part where you're saying he's going to lose it. He's going to lose it. Beautiful. Once he hits the guardrail. Did you, I mean, obviously there's no way you could have known that it would have become that iconic, that phrase. But 30 years later, when you still hear it, I imagine it has to bring a big smile to your face.
I'll tell you what, I mean, Mike, I have two nephews that are police officers out in Anaheim. And when the oldest one graduated from the Orange County Sheriff's Department, you know, before they were, becoming police, or they were police officers, going through the academy, they had like a little party once they, for a graduation party. Well, I went there, me and my brother went there to the party, and as soon as I walked in it, that's what all of these rookies screamed was "Get on it, Mel." So they knew about it. My nephew, they brought up that they actually brought up that incident in the Orange County Sheriff's Department in their academy class. Now, granted, this is 1993, back when that happened. My nephew's got probably 6 or 7 years on the job, so I don't know the time frame of what happened. But they showed that video, and we're on two different sides of the country, but their instructors told the academy class, "This is what you do not do." It was during a police pursuit, and not knowing, my nephew stood up and said, "That's my uncle," and they looked at him like he was crazy.
Oh my
story
goodness.
my nephew's telling me after the fact.
Oh my goodness. And
that just goes to show, you know what I mean, that the era and how obviously tactics have changed, and you know what I mean. Everything's changed in that many amount of years, but I mean, like I said, that just goes to show you how policing is, changed, and there's obviously different tactics. You know what I mean? But,
oh, of course. Yeah, from 93 to now, it's like I said, it's 30 years. But watching that back, I got to give Mel, and hopefully I can get Mel on the show sometime. But I got to give him credit if I'm, I'll give him credit here. And if I'm ever able to interview him in the future, I'll give him credit to his face. The way he drove during that pursuit, that man was a driver because he was masterful at staying with the car, weaving in and out of traffic. You guys briefly cut through a construction zone. You got cones there. But yet he was able to do it like, he was one of those drivers, one of those stunt drivers that you see in the movies, man. I mean, he was incredible.
Yeah, he got a lot of practice. We would probably average 3 stolen car arrests a week. I mean, that was our main, our main, everybody likes, a certain thing to do on a job. A lot of people like to go, make drug arrests. A lot of people like to, do this, do that, whatever. But that's what we enjoyed doing the most. You know what I mean? So he got a lot of practice driving.
He did. And that chase made greatest moments when Cops did a special, I think back in 2000. And that was one of them, was the opening segment. And as Mel said at the end of the chase, and you summed it up perfectly as well when you said you never know what the heck's going on. Because the way that car hit the guardrail, you would have thought that those guys, at least the driver, was killed. Miraculously, all 3 of those guys survived. One of them had to go to the hospital. But the other 2 guys, you pulled them out the car, you put them in cuffs, and you arrested them. They were very fortunate to not get killed.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was no stopping. I mean, that car went head on right into that guardrail, that end right off of 55th and Prospect there.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought the guy was going through the windshield because when we came out, it's almost like we had to peel him off the dashboard to get him out.
Yeah, no, of course. And like I said, he did have to go to the hospital, and they just missed the car because there was a car that was innocently driving by that they just narrowly missed. And the part that was that people were putting in the comments, not on this stream, but on that episode and on the Greatest Moment special was, and this is something that's become iconic to them as well as viewers of the program, when you racked the shotgun midway through the pursuit, because originally people forget the call was, when it first came over as a carjacking call, that all 3 of them were armed.
Yeah, that's the call that and that pursuit came from the 5th District.
Yep.
And and we just happened to, ironically, we were sitting in an apartment complex, sitting on a stolen car, waiting for somebody to get in it, and this call came through, and the pursuit was coming right down the street that we were sitting on, and we just happened to get right in the caravan of this pursuit. and of course, with Mel's driving, we ended up in first place right behind the car.
There you go. Yep. And then I laughed too in the part when Mel was like, there's a car right in front of him. But there was no way that car was going to be able to keep up. We're talking with Gary Mullins. This is volume 1 of the Beat, Profiles of Police Nationwide. It's an audio interview currently. You're seeing me, of course, for those of you watching on YouTube and LinkedIn, you're seeing me and Twitter. But you don't see Gary. We had some video issues, but we're still doing the interview through audio and having a great time of it. But and last note on those episodes before I move forward with the rest of your career, it's a time capsule, and I enjoy because I enjoy history as it is. Besides being a huge fire department, police department buff, I enjoy history. And looking back now, I imagine it's a heck of a tribute to the guys that aren't here anymore. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, Lou's not here anymore. Jeff Zapala's not here anymore either. So to go back, I imagine for the families of those two men to go back, watch the episodes, hear their voices again, it's got to be pretty comforting, which is a nice aspect to it too.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's you know what I mean. It's good to go back and look at them once in a while, and you see them, and you see these guys, and like you said, you know what I mean. Lou's not with us, and Jeff's not with us anymore. And actually, Lou lived right behind me in a house in a development right behind me. So yeah, it's just sometimes it hits home, but you just try to deal with it. It's just part of the job. It just happens.
Yeah, no, and he was funny when him and Bob Rose, like I said, they made the collar because the camera panned to Bob chasing the guy around the complex, which a chopper had a light on him, but Bob was trying to catch up to where the kid was hiding. And after they get him, the kid to tell you where his priorities were in life at the time, and hopefully he straightened things out. He says, "What happened to my hat?" And Lou just grabs him and says, "Don't worry about your hat, son. You're under arrest." So,
yeah, right.
Yeah. Oh man, but it very good episodes and many other pursuits. Bobby Dunn and Nate Oliver had a good one. James Simone, who's one of the more decorated cops in the history of the department, makes a cameo too. So good episodes. I gotta ask you, man. Around '95, after the strike of '94, the Indians got real good, and they had some great playoff runs in the late '90s. Made the World Series twice, '95, '97. And some great teams too, man. So did you ever have any of those security details or overtime details down at the Jake?
That early, I didn't. I wasn't working. We were assigned during all that because obviously that was the stadium is in the 3rd district where I worked, and because we were on a shift that was between a 2nd and 3rd shift, if there was any kind of special events or anything like that going on, our whole shift would get assigned there because we were like an extra shift that just, split the other 2 shifts for overload. So yeah, we got assigned to, just be in the area, and we, make sure there was no problems, and obviously, try to keep the peace. But back then, even during them playoff games, people contained themselves. When they were winning all those games and the games were over with, people were out there just having a great time. You know what I mean? There was no havoc. It was just of course, when your teams are winning and going places, people were just enjoying themselves. There wasn't any problems. So it was nice.
Yeah, did you ever? Again, and they played a lot of great games during that time, and they fell just short. Of course, they fell short to the Braves in 6 games in '95, and fell short to the Marlins in 7 games in '97. Got back to the ALCS and fell short to my Yankees in 6 games that year too. Sometimes cops, they get to be in the ballpark during the games if they're not assigned to the outside portion of the stadium. Did you ever get the chance to catch any of those great playoff games from that era, or no?
No, we didn't. Like I said, if we were working, we were on the outside perimeters, just, for crowd control and stuff like that. And I never had a chance to get inside and watch any of those games. At a later point, I actually was hired by the Cleveland Indians to work security inside the stadium, as a part-time job. But no, I never got a chance to watch any of them playoff games from the inside.
Well, yeah. Well, at least you got to probably see it from the outside too, and great teams back then, man. You'll never see a lineup like that again, right? Albert Bell, Manny Ramirez, Tomei, Kenny Lofton, Omar Vizquel. Sometimes I look at those teams objectively, even as a Yankee fan. I'm in shock that they never won the World Series.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, truly great teams. Now, you're in an interesting point in around 96, 97, 98, where you're getting more time on the job. And now, even if you don't spend a lot of time doing it, because naturally you're out on the street, you're making collars, you can spend a little bit of time mentoring younger officers because the time just flies on by and you blink, it's wow, I'm closing in on a decade on this job. So if you had that opportunity when you could pull a younger officer to the side, knowing what it was like, right, when you first came on in 1988, what advice would you give these young guys and gals coming on?
The best advice you could get them is or tell them is just, you know what I mean, you have to watch your back and you have to listen to the senior officers that are training you and just take in every bit of advice that you can get, you know what I mean, and take it to heart, and just you gotta, you know what I mean, you have to be on your toes, and the biggest thing you have to tell them is that they have to, be as professional as they can, because you're not going to get the respect if you're not. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? If you kind of fly off the handle and start saying the wrong things, and you know what I mean, the people that you're dealing with, then that brings their level up. You know what I mean? So it's almost like even though they're going to go to jail or you're going to write them a ticket, I would say you got to kill them with kindness. You got to be professional and try to keep your cool. You know what I mean? And that seems to calm, keep the situation calm most of the times. I mean, there are occasions it doesn't matter what you say or how professional you want to be. There are occasions, and many of them, that it doesn't work. But I mean, that's you just you put a uniform on to be respected. So you have to treat people with respect in order to get it. But you need to try to be as professional as you can. You know what I mean? So you get that respect.
Oh yeah. No, it's true. It's true. It's there's an old saying, right? Calm is contagious. So 9 times out of 10, if you're calm and you're on a level 1, they'll be on a level 1. But if you bring it up, I mean, unless you're walking into something where somebody's got a weapon and somebody's life is in imminent danger, that's different. But most of the time, right. That calm is contagious. And I again, I go back briefly to the cops episodes, right? Because you mentioned that there's that 10th time where it doesn't matter what you say. Tom Ward and Tim Ward, and I don't know if they just had the same last name by chance or if they were related somehow, but they get that domestic.
No, they were brothers.
Oh, they were brothers. Okay. So they even more interesting. I kind of had a feeling where they get that domestic call. It's a real tall guy. Unfortunately, he was slapping his wife around, which is not good. And the guy's just not going quietly. He's drunk on top of that, which is worse. And it took 6 of them to tackle him the whole time. Even though he was on go, that guy, Tom and Tim were calm as can be. And afterward, Tim was saying to the woman that was the complainant here, just relax, just sign the form. It's okay. And I'm like, how could you be that calm when you just wrestled a 6'4", 250-pound man? But you know what? It's professionalism.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is.
It's professionalism, and it's certainly important to demonstrate that, especially in a job like the police department. Now, in 1996, there was a slew of line of duty deaths, and they're never easy to deal with. But in 1996, this was a particularly hard time at the tail end of the year, because on December 28th, Edward Claybrooks gets into a violent struggle with the suspect. And as a result of the stress of that, he suffered a fatal heart attack. And 2 days later, while everybody's still, because even if you don't know the person directly, it's still a fellow officer, so it still affects you to a degree. And not even 2 days later is when Hilary Cudnik is shot and killed on December 30th of 1996. And losing these 2 officers is terrible enough as it is. To lose them that close together, just 2 days apart, is even worse. Now, you were telling me off the air that you knew Officer Cudnik on a personal level. So when you heard that he was shot and that he succumbed to his injuries, we don't have to talk about that day, but tell me about your fondest memories of him.
He, like I said, before he even got on a job, he was an electrician, and I mean, he still was an electrician, although he got in the police department. But he used to have a real nice, like a race boat, and he always used to go down to the flats. There was a place called Shooters on the west bank of the flats, and he would always have his boat parked. Well, there had to be 20, 30 boats parked down there. But, we were always invited on his boat. He'd take us out on his boat. And, I knew a lot of electricians, and I met him before you know what I mean, we even met on the job, I knew him. But, I mean, real nice guy. Real nice, calm, collective guy. You wouldn't, if you'd seen him walking down the street, you wouldn't even have any inclination that he was a police officer, you know, and he, you know, you couldn't rattle the guy, you know what I mean? For how big and, I mean, tall and, you know what I mean, he was stout, you know what I mean? He had to calm his voice, and he was just, you know what I mean? It's like nothing could bother him, you know what I mean? And it was a big punch in the gut when, you know, when that call came over. That was a tough one. And, his funeral was worse. You know what I mean? It was a tough time.
Oh yeah, and it's not the way that it's brutal for any police department to go through, but it's certainly not the way that you wanted to end the year of 1996, because it's two funerals at the same time. And like I said, even though you may not know, generally speaking, Officer Claybrooks on a personal level, it's still tough. You know, it's still tough to lose a fellow officer like that, no matter the district, no matter if you know him or not. So, you know, and again, and not to make it somber, we'll speed through this quickly because I don't want to make the show sad in any way. You know, Detective Robert Clark is shot and killed in 1998. And 2 years after that, in July of 2000, right when maybe the department, at least those that knew Detective Clark, are starting to kind of make peace with what happened there, is when Wayne Leon was shot and killed July 25th of 2000. His anniversary just passed a few weeks ago. And Wayne was one of your partners, you were telling me.
Yeah, we worked, he didn't work on the 4th platoon, but he worked on a different shift. But time to time, our shift would get together and we would do different, like kind of sting operations, and you know what I mean, just do a bunch of different things. But we were really, I mean, we were close, and we did on occasion. If we were short guys, he would jump up on a shift. Him and his partner Danny David would jump on a shift, and you know what I mean. So we were really tight. But I mean, that's another one that really really was a punch in the gut, because I was off that day, and I remember it was a Sunday morning, I believe, and I turned the television on, or maybe it was a Saturday because the news was on, the 12 o'clock news, and the incident came on, and it was right up at the Sunoco station, right up at 40th and Community College. You know, again, I mean, you know, that was a terrible neighborhood, and they showed the incident, and they didn't say who it was, but the police car that Wayne was driving was myself and Melvin's police car. It was car 315 that we drove every day that we worked, but we were both off, and Wayne was driving our car. So it was pretty tough. You know, it was really tough. That was bad. I mean, none of them are good. You know what I mean? But that one, that was bad. You know what I mean? But you can't say it goes with the job. But I mean, you know what I mean? It's hard to take. You know.
No, of course, and my sympathies to you. It doesn't get any easier, no matter how much time has passed. But much like I asked you with Officer Cudnik, when you look back on Wayne, what are your fondest memories of him?
What's that again?
Much like I asked you with Officer Cudnik, what are your fondest memories of Wayne when you look back at your time working with him as a police officer and as a man?
You know, like I said, we'd work, you know what I mean, hand in hand with him and his partner, because, you know what I mean, I think they were on second shift, but, you know, me and Mel were shifting between shifts, so we would always get together and, you know what I mean, go in and, you know, look for different things, and, you know, if we got somebody gave us, you know, some information on something that's going on, we would go two cars and we'd go together and help each other out. But it was, you get off your shift, and, you know, a lot of guys, and not that it's a, you know, bad thing, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Oh, well, I'm going to maybe go get dinner. I don't know. You guys want to go have a couple beers or something? And Wayne's story was, well, I'm going home to go to bed, because when I get up, I'm going to see my kids. And that's how he was. That's all he worried about, not worried about, but looked forward to, was being home with his family and his kids. You know, it was just one of them guys, you know what I mean? It was just he was a family man, and not that everyone else isn't, but I mean, he had a priority to get home and see his kids and spend time with his kids.
Yeah.
And that's it's just it was it's like the theory, the good guy finishes last, and then
Yeah.
so.
You read my mind, because that's what I was going to say next. And I'm like, it always seems to be those special ones, those real good ones in both fire department and police department that end up losing their lives in the line of duty. And, I always, I try not to focus too much on the way these men died or women died. I always try to focus on how they lived. And if somebody was close to them, I always like to ask that question: what are your fondest memories of the person? So that, paints a picture as to who they were for those that didn't know them. Now, the tail end of your career, right before your early retirement, we'll touch on leaving in 2004 momentarily, you got to be on the strike force. Now, it's called different things in different cities. For example, in New York City, it's the street crime unit. The NYPD used to have that back in the day. They don't have it anymore. But for the strike force in Cleveland, was it essentially a street crime unit, or what was the function of strike force, and how did you get into it?
Well, it just over time, when an opening come in, you would just, you'd put in a form, and put in a report to get requests to get put in that unit. And, the strike force units, a lot of them did different things depending on what district you were in. You know what I mean? There's like, some districts, there's a lot of burglaries. Sometimes there's a lot of robberies. They would, concentrate in their districts on, what kind of crimes were, prevalent, and they would go out proactively and hunt down, or set up on places that, if they were burglarizing or robbing places or whatever was going on. But I put in for that because in the 3rd district, our 3rd district, we did a little bit of drug work, but our 3rd district was almost like a miniature auto theft unit because obviously being in the downtown area, I mean, we're parking garages and parking lots and, people coming down and go to work. I mean, it was, stolen cars were prevalent. So that's what our strike force unit mainly was concerned to do. And we had a detail called the spyglass detail back then, and we would put 2 or 3 policemen on buildings, 10, 12-story buildings around downtown with a pair of binoculars, and they would watch parking lots with a radio, and then we would have 3, 4, 5 ground cars, and they would let you know, it's not hard to see a couple of guys walking through a parking lot, just walking up and down aisles of cars. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And so that's a lot of what we did. And ultimately, one of those incidents is the incident that led to my early retirement.
Yeah. So before I touch on that, I do want to say this. Eventually, and this goes for any first responder, you're seeing, listen, some of it is fun, some of it is pretty rewarding, but you are seeing some very heavy things. I'm sure you went to homicide, suicide, overdose scenes, car accidents, to say the least, where it's just not pretty what you're seeing without going into too much detail. And that can take a toll on one's psychological health and certainly overall, you might even start to feel it physically, to where it's important to have outlets, healthy outlets, to decompress if you can. So for you, just so it didn't break you down over time, what helped you to decompress from some of the heavier stuff that you would see on the job?
It's hard to say. It was just a repetition of it happening. I mean, it just at some point. I mean, yeah, you see it, and I mean, when you first start seeing it, young on the job, I mean, you're in culture shock. You know what I mean? But I guess it just goes with any repetition on the job. It just, I don't know whether it just makes you numb or you just, it just becomes part of your being that you get used to it because you're going to see it. You know what I mean? I mean, there was really nothing that in my in my seeing of it that would make me decompress anything or try to handle it. But I hate to say it, that you just kind of got used to it. You know what I mean? It was just part of the job. It was going to happen anyway. I mean, it was going to happen. So yeah, I really don't have an explanation for that. I mean, when you, like you said, you first get on the job and you start seeing stuff like that, it bothers you. But I guess it's just, some point you just either get used to it or get numb to it.
Yeah, there, and a lot of guys talk about that separation that they have to put up, where it's not that they don't care, it's not they're callous, but I remember somebody telling me, it's like, listen, even though you're responding to these terrible things, I'm not the one that did that to them. I just happened to get here after the fact. So it's not that I don't care on a human level. I'm paraphrasing this gentleman, but that's something that helped him. He's like, I didn't do this to them. I'm just here. And the more of it you do, like you said, I think you do kind of develop a tolerance of it. Not that you're accepting of it. That's not what I'm saying. But as you said, you kind of just, you build up a little bit of that numbness and that emotional separation, which helps, because even though everything's chaotic and you got family involved, if they're at the scene, you do have a job to do. And, it's not going to help if you're losing your cool as well, because then the job doesn't get done. There's somebody here in the chat. And anytime I interview a policeman or a firefighter, he always asks this question. It's our little running joke. He's a retired correctional officer himself. And some cops have, other cops haven't. He wants to know, as part of our running joke, did you ever in your time on the beat deliver a baby?
No, I did not.
Okay. All right, Joe. So we didn't get that.
As close as I came was we got a call to go to the Justice Center, where, of course, the jails are, because EMS was taking a prisoner, had to take a prisoner to the hospital. We didn't know what was going on, but anytime, EMS has to take somebody to a prisoner to the hospital, you have to follow them, obviously, because the person's still under arrest. And here to come find out, it was a female that was pregnant, and by the time they got her down the elevator and in the ambulance, she had her baby right in the ambulance.
Wow.
So that's as close as I came to delivering one. I you know what I mean? I witnessed it, but no, I wasn't on the receiving end of it. No.
Okay. Interesting enough. That's still a pretty interesting story. So, like I said, that's Joe. He's a loyal viewer of the show. That's him and I's long-time running joke. So I guess we can get into that incident now. I mean, you're hard at work. It's a great job for you. You have a lot of experience by this point. And it's always tough for guys to get cut short due to injury. But I guess I'll ask you here, what happened? What happened that unfortunately led to you suffering this injury, and unfortunately by extension led to your earlier than you would have wanted to retirement?
Well, like I said, I was telling you about that spyglass detail we'd have, and we do it probably twice a week. And again, there was somebody called us. In fact, I was with my sergeant and my lieutenant in an undercover car, and they gave us information that there was two guys wandering around in a parking lot behind the Greyhound bus station. So we pulled up on the street and we sat there. We were watching these guys, and it wasn't within 2 minutes. They broke the window of the car and got in the car. Well, of course, the way the law states, if the car doesn't move, they didn't steal it. So, you literally have to wait till they get in it and start the car in order to do that, to be determined a theft. You know what I mean? Otherwise, if they peel the column and it's not started, it's a criminal damage. You know what I mean? So, and long story short, so they did get in the car and they started to pull out, and I was driving and I pulled in and we just went bumper to bumper so they couldn't get out. And there were two guys in the car, and one took off running, and I chased him, and he was going up a fence over the Greyhound building parking lot, and I grabbed onto him, tried to pull him off the fence, and he kicked me in the face a few times. I mean, and this guy's a pretty decent-sized guy. He's like 6'3", 6'4". He had to be every bit of 200-some pounds, and as I was trying to pull him off the fence, and he's kicking me in the face, I just gave him a big yank and ended up rupturing my pec muscle muscle out of my arm to struggle with him trying to pull him off the fence. So, but he ended up, I limped my way back to the car because, my two other bosses chased the other guy. One of them was arrested, but I think they chased the guy that got away from me. And he ran across the street, and in the city there, in that area, there's a theater division called Playhouse Square, and this guy ends up running right in the back door. I don't know how the back door was open to this theater, and they're chasing this guy. This guy ends up running right through the stage while there's a play going on. Chased him right out of the theater, up the stairways, and at this time they're telling me where he's running. So I finally got in the car and came around the corner, and I pulled up right to the front door to Playhouse Theater, and he tried coming out the door, but he ended up pushing the door trying to get out right in the side of the undercover car. So, but needless to say, I had to go through a surgery, and it took a little bit too long to get the surgery approved, and went through quite a bit of rehab. And at the end of the rehab, the doctor and the surgeon determined that I wasn't going to be fit for duty because of the vast injury that I sustained and the surgery that had to be done. So that ultimately was pretty much the end of it for me.
And it's unfortunate because, like I said, it's earlier than what you would have wanted. You were having a lot of fun. It sounded like 16 years to be proud of. And then there comes that adjustment period where it's like, okay, well, now what do I do? Because you're still at this point a very young guy. You got a family, of course, to look after on top of that. So you pivoted. Now you're in the construction business. You're doing pretty well for yourself. When I was trying to get you on the show originally, you got a busy schedule these days. So tell me about finding that second passion and being able to continue to sustain yourself and pivot, even though you weren't anticipating having to pivot, being able to ultimately pivot successfully as you've managed to.
Yeah, well, I was, this business was handed to me from a lieutenant of mine when I was still younger on the job. I was doing all the scheduling, and I was working for him anyway. So it was more of a security business, and we would perform security for like the utilities companies and stuff, especially when they had to go into bad areas. You know what I mean? They wanted the police with them to make sure there was no problems, and nothing got stolen off of their equipment and trucks and stuff like that. So, I mean, I just kept it going and going. I was, then he ended up giving me the business because he went a different route. So, it just kept going. And, I mean, I was doing it ever since. So, but what it's changed into more or less is now, I mean, I still provide security for these companies, but I set up all their traffic zones. If they're doing work on the street, and we have to cut off a lane or something, I set up all the zones, put all the barrels up and all the signs up and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's something, it's nowhere near, you know what I mean, in the field of still being, on the job, but I still, I run into, policemen all the time that I know. So it's like a camaraderie thing. And besides, it gives me something to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's important. It's important. And you're your own boss. You can pick your own hours. If you want to take vacation, you can take vacation. If you want to take a day off, you can do that too. So I imagine it's nice. And, I'm kind of in that early stages of it because I opened up my own consulting business recently. So I'm learning, at 23 years old, how to be a business owner. But, tell me about some of the biggest rewards of it. I mean, you touched on some, but expand a little bit. 19 years now of this, or more than that, I should say. But 19 years where you've been away from the police department doing strictly this. What are some of the biggest rewards that you've seen in almost 20 years of running this business?
The big what? I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Biggest rewards.
Rewards?
Yeah, of being able to run this business. What are some of the more rewarding moments, if you will?
Well, it's like I said, you touched down. I can, I do the scheduling, so I can take off when I want. It gives me more time now to, travel and do things that, you know what I mean? I mean, by now, I would have been retired from the police department anyway, but, yeah, I guess it's just the freedom, you know, to be your own boss and, you know, choose your hours and do what you got to do. But like I said, it's nice because you know, most of the contractors I work for are downtown where I work. You know what I mean? My whole career. So, you know, even store owners still that I know down there, and you know what I mean. And not a lot of policemen. There's still a few that I know from down there, but it just to just be down there, still be in the mix of it. You know what I mean? Is you know, I guess if you could say rewarding, because who knows where I'd be working, or you know what I mean? Because you know, but when that happened, you know what I mean. I was 39 years old, and I mean, I'm not just going to be done. I mean, I got to do something. You know what I mean? But I think the if you were talking about a rewarding part, it's being somewhat in the same realm. You know what I mean? And dealing with the same people. You know, versus going and driving a truck or something, or you know what I mean? Anything else like that. You know, so.
Yeah, you've landed on your feet, and that's impressive. And I'm glad to see that you're doing well. And it seems that, you know, listen, I always wonder whenever I go back and watch these old episodes of Cops, how are these guys doing today? And it seems like you're doing well. And I'm really glad I was able to get you on the show. But we're not done yet. We got to do the rapid fire. And what I liked is when we were figuring out the video issues earlier, I saw your notes, which I appreciate. You did prepare for the rapid fire. So we'll get right into it with the 5 hit run questions from me and the 5 hit run answers from you. And the first one is, funniest call you ever responded to?
Oh boy, I was thinking about that and trying to, you know, but I mean, what the call that sticks in my mind, and I don't know if it's funny on our aspect of it, but we got and I was working with Melvin. We got a call into an apartment complex, you know, up in our area, up in the projects. It was a disturbance call that they said that there was somebody in the stairwell or the stairwells going up into these apartment buildings, creating a disturbance and yelling and screaming. And so we go up, we got to the location. We can hear this guy making noise, you know what I mean? We went into the building, start walking up the stairwell, and we get up to the second floor stairs, and the best I recall, it was the middle of winter, and it was cold. And there's an individual standing in the hallway, completely naked, and the best way I can put it on your podcast here is he was trying his hardest to get intimate with the brick wall.
Okay. Well, there's that. Doesn't sound too comfortable. But
So we had to of course we had to get EMS, wrap him up in a sheet, a blanket, and it wasn't looking well for this poor guy. But the outcome was that back then too, that was in the era, and it's still around, but not like it was. You know, that there was the drug called PCP or what.
yeah,
and
PCP.
That's like the telltale sign when somebody, for some reason, and you come across that a lot. That when people start smoking that PCP and that wet, for some reason it makes them want to take their clothes off. I mean, and we came across that a lot, but not to this guy's extreme. It was definitely a little odd.
No, I for sure. I mean, apparently what people have told me that work in, like I said to you off the air, I work in a firehouse. So a lot of these guys in the firehouse, of course, are paramedics. And they're saying that I guess the effect of the drug makes you so sweaty that people want to, disrobe as a result. But my goodness, as soon as you said, oh boy, I knew it was going to be a funny one. That is pretty funny. Second, most uplifting call you ever responded to?
And again, I was working with Melvin. It was Christmas Eve. I don't recall what year, but it was Christmas Eve, and we were up a little bit south in our district, we were getting off the freeway and exit ramp, and there was a car that careened into the median, careened into the cement wall. And he was kind of scraping along the wall, and he had a flat tire. So we pulled the guy over. I mean, he was almost getting off the freeway. And of course, the guy obviously had a little bit too much Christmas Eve cheer in him. You know, he was pretty intoxicated. And here he lived. He literally. He almost made it home. He lived about 3 blocks from where he was going to get off the exit ramp. So we look in the back seat, and the whole back seat is full of Christmas presents. So we get this guy out of his car, find out where he lives. He lives, about 3 blocks from us, where we were at. So put him in the back of our police car. I drove the guy's car home, and Melvin followed me with this guy in the car. And here we had to turn the lights on, you know what I mean? Because I don't know if anybody's home. We're trying to get somebody's attention, and here his wife comes out the front door, and she's livid. I mean, I didn't even think she was going to let him in the house. But we put him in the house, and we, helped his wife get all the Christmas gifts in because, he had 2 young kids that came out, and, he didn't go to jail. You know what I mean? It would have probably, you don't want to ruin a kid's Christmas, so.
Right. No, of
that
course.
was one of the more, that was more, you know what I mean? It would, you hate to see a kid not have Christmas because, you know what I mean? His father was irresponsible and, whatever happened. But yeah, he got a free pass, and so I'm sure the kids had an enjoyable Christmas that day.
Yeah, no, there is that discretion that a police officer can have. And, sometimes it's good to utilize it. Sometimes, there's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law. And there it was the spirit of the law on full display in a different sense. So nice. A good story there. Third, favorite cop show or cop movie?
Movies I'm not really fond of that much. I mean, some of them I'll watch for a little bit, but there's none that really stick to me because, being in that position, on the job, and then watching the movies, it's like they hype them up, and you just know when there's going to be incidents and things that are happening that don't happen in real life on the police department. You know what I mean? They might try to portray them like that, but it just, they solve a crime in an hour, and you know what I mean? And it just, in my opinion, it doesn't show the true life obstacles that you deal with and the incidents that we deal with on the job, in investigating crimes and how they pan out and how they take days and stuff to pan out, and they put it all together in an hour, and it just sometimes it just makes me look and go, that would never happen that way. Yeah. That wouldn't happen that way. It can't happen that way. You know what I mean? So yeah. I'm not too fond on movies, but the documentaries, 48 Hours of Dateline, they follow the incidents as they happen, and they give you see the updates, and you see how these crimes are investigated and how they come to the conclusion and how they do the, interviews. And that's what happened. You know what I mean? That's the truth of, how it's done, because, and obviously, sometimes, they don't have the same police officers, but they go through the, steps of how this happened and how they do the investigation. So I'm more into, if I'm going to watch something like that, I like watching the documentaries where, before I, just sit down and watch a movie. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, I understand that. My mother loves that too. She loves 48 Hours. She loves Dateline, 2020, all that stuff. I always catch her watching it.
Right.
And, you know, it's good. It's very procedural, and it really makes you marvel, especially in some of these smaller towns where they don't have that many resources as bigger cities do when they're able to solve these crimes. You know, it really makes you marvel at the tenacity that some of these investigators have. And, you know, you certainly applaud them for it. Fourth, after a long day of being a cop in the city of Cleveland, favorite bar or restaurant in Cleveland?
Oh, I'll tell you what, Mike. That's a real broad scope. That's probably as broad as, or well, not on the same level, but you know, you're talking about New York City. I mean, it depends. You know what? You know, I can categorize it in you know three different areas. I mean, you have your local, you know, family-owned little diner, you know, bars on the corner that, you know, specialize in their certain food, you know, that are, you know, for the most part, pretty inexpensive. And it just, you know, it's just like the neighborhood people, you know what I mean? Like over, you know, on the south side in the 2nd District, you know, they have, right off Clark Avenue, there's a bar called the Clark Bar. And, you know what I mean? It's all just neighbors that are there. And, you know, they have really good food. And, you know, you can get a beer for a couple dollars, you know what I mean? Or you go around the corner to the Raleigh Inn, and it's a little bit more expensive, but it's right in the neighborhood. I mean, there's houses, you know, directly next door to these places, you know what I mean? And then you get into, you know what I mean, the kind of family-owned restaurants or delis downtown, you know what I mean, that offer you the same, but it's just on a different level, you know what I mean? They have a lot of, you know, like, you know, corned beef restaurants, you know what I mean? Sliman's is a big one. It's probably the most popular one around, and you hear about it everywhere, you know what I mean? And, you know, when I was on the job, we did that. When we were working our shift, he'd have to open up, the son would open up the restaurant to start cooking the corned beef before the restaurant was even open at 1 in the morning. And we go in there and he'd make us coffee, and we'd sit there, you know what I mean? Take a break and have coffee, you know?
Nice.
And then right down the street, there's this ethnic European, little family-owned restaurant called Marie's, and you know, people, it's like the hidden secret. You know what I mean? You can get, you know, chicken paprikash, and I mean, you name it. And I mean, it's just there's a, you know, a couple little places like that. You know what I mean? But then you get into your super upscale restaurants, and I mean, there's a handful of them. But there's a place downtown called the Marble Room, and I mean, it's top notch. You know. You're not going there once a week. You might go there once every 3 months because you're gonna pay for it. You know what I mean? But there's a handful of them. The Blue Point and Johnny's. You know, Pier W's one right on the lake. It's just outside of Cleveland and Lakewood. But I mean, you're eating dinner and it's all windows, and you're just looking at the lake like you're looking at the ocean. You know what I mean? But there is a handful of them that, you know, are really good places. You know what I mean? But they're everywhere, you know what I mean? But,
oh, that's of course, yeah. You know, whenever you're on patrol, you get the beauty of it. If you're working in the areas like that, you get to really diversify your palate. And yeah, there's that Midwest cuisine, man. As I get older, as I delve deeper into my 20s, I do want to travel more. It's one of my goals. And I got to get out to Cleveland, man, and try some of the stuff you guys got going on over there. Because, of course, I know New York cuisine. Being in Connecticut, I got Connecticut cuisine. We got our pizza down here, too, which we're pretty famous for. But that Midwest cuisine, you know, out Cleveland, Chicago areas like that, gotta try it, you know. So you're making me hungry.
Right, exactly.
You're making me quite hungry. And for the final question, the rapid fire, fifth and finally, we talked about it earlier, but like I said, you can expand here. Let's say somebody just graduated the police academy in Cleveland. For your 16 years of experience on the beat, if you could pull that person to the side, and you got some family, of course, that are cops, you mentioned your nephews, what advice would you give a young guy or gal coming on the job right now?
Well, Mike, that's a tough one, but I'm going to try to, you know, sugarcoat it the best I can. I mean, you know as well as I know, and probably all the listeners know, I mean, from when I, you know, got on a job up until now, law enforcement is a completely different animal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The policing policies, they're changed drastically. You know what I mean? It's not, you know what I mean? It's in my opinion, it is not nowhere near as much as a proactive police department. You know what I mean? At least where I'm at, and I mean, you see it on the news. Not that the news tells all the stories, but it just, you know, there's just it needs to go back and be more of a proactive, you know what I mean? It's a proactive police society to try to make these changes. But I don't know what I would. I don't at this point. I don't know what I would tell a young kid on the job. It's the same thing that I tried to explain. I mean, you got to keep your head up. You got to, you know what I mean, and you got to try to be as professional as you can. But I mean, these guys now they're you know, they're behind the eight ball. You know what I mean? It's just they're not. They don't. Every time you turn around, there's another policy to let them not do their job the way I would want to do my job. But like I said, everything's changed. So I don't know. But I guess what I would tell them, you know, my advice, if they want to, if they truly want to serve the public, you know what I mean, and be proactive and serve the public, and you know what I mean, and want to, you know what I mean, be a part of the city, do that. Unfortunately, I tell them you might want to take the fire department test.
No, you're not the first one. You're not the first one to say that. You know, a lot of guys have told me that. You know, they've said I take the fire department test nowadays, and it's true. You know, the pendulum is certainly swinging in one direction. But listen, either way, you got to be careful. You certainly got to be careful nowadays. Gary,
Yeah.
This has been very enjoyable. Don't hang up yet. We'll talk a little bit off the air before we say our goodbyes. I'm just going to say goodbye to the audience. Before I say goodbye to the audience, any shout outs to anyone or anything that you'd like to give? You got me, Gary?
Yeah. No. That was for me?
Yeah, that was for you. Any shout outs that you want to give to anyone or anything?
No, I don't. You know what? I don't know. I only let a couple people know about what's going on here, and I don't even know if they're listening. So I don't.
No worries.
I'm kind of on that.
Yeah, no worries. Well, they'll find it later on. I'll send you the new link. Like I said, we did have some video issues, and we were able to work through them. We did an interview over the phone instead. You guys, like I said, for those of you watching on YouTube, you can see me, but the person you heard for the last hour and a half was Gary via speakerphone. So appreciate it, Gary. Like I said, don't hang up. Just going to say goodbye to the audience. We'll talk off the air. Coming up next on the Mike to New Haven podcast, he was in the old New York City EMS, and then it merged with the New York City Fire Department in 1996. And around that time, too, he was a charter member of New York City's Office of Emergency Management when it was also formed in the year 1996. So, interesting guy. He's got his own podcast called 5 Minutes to Chaos, talking about emergency management. And that will be Steve Kerr, who retired as a deputy chief with the FDNY in their EMS section. And he'll join me for volume 41 this Friday of the Best of the Bravest, interviews with the FDNY's elite. So an interesting start to the Beat, this new mini series, but it was still a very enjoyable interview. Like I said, you got to love live podcasting, but we worked through it and it was an enjoyable conversation. And I want to thank Gary Mullins very much for coming on. So, and thank you to all of you for watching. So on behalf of retired Cleveland police officer Gary Mullins, I'm Mike Colón. And this has been volume 1 of the Beat, Profiles of Police Nationwide. And we will see you next time. Have a great rest of your night. And like I said, Gary, stick around. We'll say our goodbyes off the air.